Hello, class. This is a lecture for Friday, tomorrow, which I'm going to be missing. And yeah, I'm sad to be missing this. It's a big day for Moby-Dick, but hopefully this will be a good substitute. I want to say just before I talk about Moby-Dick, though, that there's just something else I wanted to say about the outline due Saturday and this whole third paper. Talked to a number of you working on whittling down your idea. I just wanted to throw out there one way to think about this would be actually somewhat similar to the first two papers, where you're choosing a part, say a chapter of Moby Dick, a scene from Paradise Lost or Lear, and you're analyzing the experience that is created for you in that chapter, the little drama for the reader that is set out in stages, right? First, this paragraph with its metaphors and its allusions and its word choices and so on, and then the next stage, the next paragraph or the section, and then so how does this part that I'm looking at unfold, create an experience which gives me experiential knowledge of something, the thing that the chapter or the scene is most about. Okay, so there's an argument you could make about a part. And then, of course, at the beginning and end of the paper, you're also weaving it into the whole. Or you could have a whole other chapter at the end talking about how this matters in the context of the whole book. But just a thought about approaching this final paper and picking your topic, your chapter, etc. Okay, so in Moby Dick, we are taking it up to chapter 131 today. And I want to group my comments under 4 headings. So first I'm going to talk about Ahab and the carpenter, where we left off on Wednesday. Ahab's getting his leg replaced and all that. So Ahab and the carpenter, which is especially chapters 106 to 108. Then we're going to talk about Queequeg and his coffin. That's chapter 110. This chapter then becomes the life buoy. Later on, they seal it. Queequeg, of course, lives, does not die like he thought. They seal up his coffin and make it a buoy. So you have a life buoy that's a coffin. Obviously, this is very, only Melville invents stuff like this. But we're going to talk about those Queequeg chapters, what's happening there. Third, we're going to talk about Ahab and Starbuck. All right. And so I'm thinking here especially of chapter 109 from last time. And then the musket, chapter 123. And then there's going to be another climactic Starbuck chapter in the next Monday's reading. So we're going to talk about Ahab and Starbuck, and then the fourth kind of heading we're going to address today is Pip. Very important character in this last third of the book. So the first place Pip comes up is, we passed it by, I think the readings from Monday, and it's back there, chapter 93, the castaway. That's the first place we hear about Pip. And then we hear about him in, I want to say it's 125, the log and line. And then chapter 129, Ahab and Pip, the cabin. Okay, so the blacksmith, Queequeg, Starbuck, Ahab, Pip, Ahab. There's our topics. Okay, blacksmith first. So we left off with 106, chapter 106. Let me turn to that. That's 505. All right, and we left off, as I recall, talking about page 506 and sorrow being deeper and kind of more basic and essential, defining than joy for Ahab. Okay, moving on to chapter 107, the carpenter. The first thing I want to pull out of the carpenter here is just the opening description, first paragraph of 107. Seat thyself, Ishmael says, sultanically among the moons of Saturn, and take high abstracted man alone, and he seems a wonder, a grandeur, and a woe. But from the same point, take mankind in mass, and for the most part, they seem a mob of unnecessary duplicates, both contemporary and hereditary. But most humble though he was, and far from furnishing an example of the high, humane abstraction, the Pequod's carpenter was no duplicate. Hence, he now comes in person on this stage. So this is interesting. You have the kind of reflections on the whole mass of people together and then individuals. You can put this right beside that chapter, Knights and Squires, where we heard about individuals versus the common, like the glorious common, ideal man, right, and all that. Anyway, here, what's being said. We've got high abstracted man alone, a wonder, grandeur. This is kind of like the idealized man. Then you have mankind in mass. This is the way everybody appears when they're all together. Crowds usually fall to the lowest common denominator. This is the problem with democracy, according to Plato and Aristotle. This is also why some kind of crowd experiences can be really lame. And so on and so forth. So you have mankind in mass. They're all kind of duplicates. They all look the same. I'm not going to comment on college students and the way they dress. But then when you take one of them alone, the Pequod's carpenter, you look at him by himself, you realize he is no duplicate. He is utterly himself. Now, this is an unimportant character. We never hear from him again after these chapters, for the most part. But, I mean, he does come out and build Queequeg's coffin, I guess. But anyway, he's utterly unique. And he's worthy of his own little chapter. Even though he is not the sharpest stick in the woodpile, he's, a lesser character, less intelligent, relatively unimportant plot-wise. But he's still important. As I've been saying this whole time to you guys, everything and everyone is important in Ishmael's point of view. So I think you could take that paragraph and just, apply it to everyone. Good. Let's move on to Ahab and the Carpenter next chapter. This is a very Shakespearean chapter. We've got our opening dramatic framing. And Ahab is in his kind of high, tragic Hamlet kind of mode, making big speeches that this lower, more basic character doesn't even understand. And all these humorous kind of stage directions, sneezing and everything. I'm on page 511. What I want to focus on is next page, 512. Ahab refers to the carpenter as a man maker. Well, man maker. And this guy's like, what are you talking about? He's, of course, making him a leg. So I think that's what he is referring to. Talking about Prometheus and all this stuff. Let's look at the bottom of that, the last full paragraph, 512. Here Ahab, who's just really talking to himself, and the carpenter's overhearing it. Ahab is kind of speculating on what, if you could rebuild my whole body, what would I ask for? What would I want? So this is kind of Ahab's ideal self that he's speculating on. Hold, while Prometheus is about it, I'll order a complete man after a desirable pattern. Imprimus. What? Did Melville subscribe to Imprimus? Anyway, Imprimus, 50 feet high in his socks, then chest modeled after the Thames Tunnel. This is the tunnel that goes from England to France. No, that's not true. There's a tunnel under the Thames, right? Sorry, not from England to France. That was not there in the 19th century, but a tunnel under the River Thames in London. Then legs with roots to them to stay in one place. Then arms 3 feet through the wrist, no heart at all, brass forehead, about 1/4 of an acre, fine brains. And let me see, shall I order eyes to see outwards? No, but put a skylight on top of his head to illuminate inwards. There, take the order, and away. And The carpenter's like, what? So what does Ahab want? We already knew all this, but it's a different way of coming at it. He wants to be huge and strong, okay? He wants to have roots stick down into the ground, immovable. That's something he values. Brass forehead, right? So kind of stubbornness, no heart, right? No weakness of feelings. Fine brains, wants to understand everything. No eyes to see outward, only light to let in. So he wants to think. He doesn't care about what he sees. Again, we've seen this many times. There's no openness in Ahab. Everything's Ahab, 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 Ahab. Okay, so this all makes a kind of egoistic sense. He gets the leg made. Last point I wanted to make here about this chapter, 514, next page. Let's see. He says, how long before the leg is done? About 5 lines down. Perhaps an hour, sir, says the carpenter. Bungle away at it then, says Ahab, and bring it to me. O life, here I am, proud as a Greek god, and yet standing debtor to this blockhead for a bone to stand on. Cursed be that mortal interindebtedness, which will not do away with ledgers. I would be as free as air, and I'm down in the whole world's books. I am so rich I could have given bid for bid with the wealthiest praetorians at the auction of the Roman Empire, which was the world's, and yet I owe for the flesh in the tongue I brag with. By heavens, I'll get a crucible and into it, and dissolve myself down to one small compendious vertebra. So, again, speaking his desires more than anything that will ever happen, of course. But I wanted to seize on 2 little phrases from that paragraph. Cursed be that mortal interindebtedness. Mortal interindebtedness. All mortal things are interindebted to one another. This is another way of phrasing the monkey rope principle and that kind of fundamental principle of relation. Everything is what it is in relation. Interindebtedness is another way to say that. We all owe one another for various things. Things that would not be the same about us or about our world without each of these people. Ahab depends on this carpenter, doesn't want to, but has to. And that is a big part of the problem. This is a part of the wall. This is a part of the problem. It's part of the oppressiveness of the world. He can't be free in the way that he dreams of being free, which is a kind of negative liberty, a kind of freedom to do anything he wants, utter lack of constriction, utter lack of limitation. That's a satanic dream. That's this is part of Adam's fall, right? An impossible knowledge, an impossible liberty, rising above his place, above his limitations. It's impossible. Ahab knows it is. He speculates about throwing himself into a crucible and dissolving himself down to one vertebra. Why a vertebra? Well, one vertebra, is just one unit, doesn't have any other vertebra that it relies on. But then it's also absurd. Who cares about a single vertebra without the rest of the back, without the rest of the body? There's something absurd about it, even as he wishes for it. Okay, so yeah, there's Ahab. All right, so my first stop was Ahab and the blacksmith. Let me talk about Queequeg, and then I'm going to come back to Ahab and Starbuck, because the next chapter I see is Ahab and Starbuck in the cabin, 109. But I'm going to move forward to Queequeg and then come back. Let's see. It's Queequeg in his coffin. This is chapter 110. Great chapter. Love this chapter. Queequeg thinks he's going to die, builds his coffin. Look at the first page of 110. This is page 519. They, as we know, are bringing up all the barrels onto the deck. And you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk about Queet 110, and then I'll go back to 109. So in 109, Starbuck wants them to bring all the barrels up to check them for leaks. So they do that. They've got all the barrels up on the top of the ship with oil in them, sloshing around. The hold down below is empty, and so the ship is top heavy and kind of. Ooh. And I love the famous line at the end of that first paragraph. Top heavy was the ship as a dinnerless student with all Aristotle in his head. Memorable sentiment for us here at Hillsdale. And next paragraph, Queequeg is seized with a fever, and which brings him nigh to his end. Okay, so we get a coffin. Queequeg starts sleeping in it, and so on and so forth. This whole chapter is interesting, but I want to look at the carvings that he makes on the coffin at the end of the chapter. Page 524. These end up being really interesting and important. So he gains strength, first paragraph, getting stronger, and back to normal. Okay. With a wild whimsiness, he now used his coffin for a sea chest, right? Doesn't need it to die in anymore. Use it as a sea chest. And emptying it into it his canvas bag of clothes, set them in order there. Many spare hours he spent in carving the lid with all manner of grotesque figures and drawings, and it seemed that hereby he was striving in his rude way to copy parts of the twisted tattooing on his body. Interesting. And this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer of his island, who, by those hieroglyphic marks, had written out on his body a complete theory of the heavens and the earth, and a mystical treatise on the art of attaining truth, so that Queequeg in his own proper person was a riddle to unfold. A wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even himself could read, though his own live heart beat against them, and these mysteries were therefore destined in the end to moulder away with the living parchment whereon they were inscribed, and so be unsolved to the last. Okay, that's fascinating because a number of different reflections here. One, we hear now what the tattoos on his body apparently mean, right? They're hieroglyphics that have a complete theory of the heavens and the earth, mystical treatise in the art of attaining truth. What? So you have this kind of cosmic epistemological mystery that means so much, but is also impossible to understand entirely. That's stamped on his body. That's marked into his body hieroglyphically, and then also into his coffin. So part of what we see here is the utter mystery of Queequeg's body, which is to say, the utter mystery of Queequeg himself. Because why are these written into his surface? To show what he is, right? They mark him. He himself is a mystery that is connected to everything in the world. And this is, of course, every human. Queequeg is symbolic of all of them. Also, as we remember, Queequeg's hieroglyphic markings connect him to the whale, who has the same kind of markings on his skin. So the whale also, other creatures, everything in the world is a mystery unto itself that is charged with meaning, but so much meaning that it is overwhelming. And I'm thinking here, you could call it a kind of surfeit of intelligibility, right? The mystery comes not just from a black hole of nothingness, but it's blinding light. It's too much intelligibility, so much that you can't take it in. A line that I love from Paradise Lost that I neglected to read with you guys describes God the Father in Book 3 as dark with surfeit of light. Is that right? Anyway, the idea is that, is it dark with surfeit? The idea is that there's so much light pouring forth from his being that you look at it and you're blinded. But that's a darkness from an overwhelming quantity and force. That's the way being is for Melville. That's the way things are in all of their mystery. They're all connected to the meaning of everything, as we've seen, and they're all gateways to the infinite, gateways to the divine. When you talk about the mysterious relationship between the finite and the infinite, we are also connecting to Wordsworth and Romanticism that want to find the path to the divine in the concrete little particular things. Very much the case with Melville. The last thing I would say about this beautiful image is that his coffin is marked with the same things that his life is marked with. Somehow the meaning of his life is tied up with his death. Okay? The mystery of his life tied up with the way that his life ends. This is something Aristotle said once, that you only really know what a person's life is when they have died. You can only really narrate the complete life once you get to the conclusion and see how they have died, and so on and so forth. But also this has, of course, a fullness of meaning in a Christian view, that where death is a new birth. The mystery of your life is tied up with the passage of death into a fullness of being, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's important. Let's go back to Starbuck now and talk about chapter 109, and then we'll move forward to the Musket chapter and see what's happening there. So here at the end of the book, two relationships stand out. Two of Ahab's relationships stand out and start to make a difference in a way that they have not so far. One, Starbuck. Two, Pip. Pip and Starbuck end up making a difference in Ahab's life in ways that he could not have predicted, we could not have predicted earlier. Ahab the tyrant ends up having encounters that he can't just explain away and ignore like he's been able to so far. So let's look at Ahab and Starbuck first. Chapter 109, page 516, 517, 518. So, bottom of the first page, Starbuck says, okay, we've got a leak in the oil. Oil is money. This is what we're here for. We got to bring up the barrels, find where the leak is. Practical matter. Top of 517, Ahab says, up Burtons, the Burtons of the barrels, up Burtons and break out. Now that we are nearing Japan, heave to here for a week to tinker a parcel of old hoops. Either do that, says Starbuck, or waste in one day more oil than we may make good in a year. What we come 20,000 miles to get is worth saving, sir. So it is, if we get it, says Ahab. So obviously, Starbuck's thinking of oil, Ahab's thinking of Moby-Dick. I was speaking of the oil in the hold, sir, says Starbuck. And I was not speaking or thinking of that at all. Begone, let it leak. I'm all a leak myself. Aye, leaks and leaks. Not only full of leaky casks, but those leaky casks are in a leaky ship, and that's a far worse plight than the Pequod's, man. So, he's blowing off Starbuck. Leaks? You're as leaky as those barrels are, whatever that means. Okay. And Starbuck says, what will the owners say? Let the owners stand on Nantucket Beach and out-yell the typhoons. What cares Ahab? Owners? Owners? Thou art always prating to me, Starbuck, about those miserly owners, as if the owners were my conscience. But look ye, the only real owner of anything is its commander, and hark ye, my conscience is in this ship's keel. On deck. So Ahab's getting peremptory. His conscience is in the ship's keel, i.e. his moral sense of what's important, which, as we know, is kind of monomaniacally focused on one thing. I'm in charge here. Get out. I'm steering this ship. But Starbuck doesn't stand down. He says, let's see, a better man than I might well pass over in thee. what he would quickly enough resent in a younger man. Aye, and in a happier Captain Ahab. Okay, he blows him off again. Get out of here, on deck. Nay, sir, not yet. I do entreat. I do dare, sir, to be forbearing. Shall we not understand each other better than hitherto, Captain Ahab? So Starbuck's trying to reason with this man. Ahab seizes a loaded musket from the rack, pointing it towards Starbuck, exclaimed, There is one God that is Lord over the earth, and one captain that is Lord over the Pequod, on deck. Okay, reminds you of Hobbes's Leviathan, where mentioned right in the extract at the start of the book. In Hobbes, the leader of the state is compared to God. Not the same as God, but he leads the polity, the body of the state, in the same way that God leads all creation. So there's this kind of strong analogy between them, which now Ahab is taking to justify his own power. Very kind of tyrannical framing, obviously. For an instant, in the flashing eyes of the mate and his fiery cheeks, you would have almost thought that he had really received the blaze of the leveled tube, the gun. But mastering his emotion, he half calmly rose, and as he quitted the cabin, paused for an instant and said, Thou hast outraged me, not insulted me, sir. But for that I ask thee not to beware of Starbuck. Thou wouldst but laugh. But let Ahab beware of Ahab. Beware of thyself, old man. Nobody ever talks this way to Ahab except for Starbuck. And even he is, overwhelmed at certain points that he can't say things like this. But he talks back. He says truth to power. Speaks truth to power for just a moment. And I think this is part of the moral center of this book, right? There's so many people that just go Ahab's way, and Ahab talks so much. You're wondering, where are we in this book? Here we are. Here's a standing ground for this book. Because as Starbuck knows, Ahab is Ahab's worst problem. He's kind of caught in Ahab world. Ahab. Ahab is the problem because Ahab is all that's there, right? He's his own worst enemy, and his pride and his delusion also. Okay, beware of thyself, old man. Old man is interesting, right? He's never been called that before. He'll be called that a few more times at the end of this book. What's the significance there? I would read it as an allusion to Paul's understanding of the old man. I think this is in 1st or 2nd Corinthians. But Paul talks about the old man and the new man in a spiritual sense. The old man is the human of fleshly, sinful attachments and defined by an allegiance to sin and the ways of the world and the flesh. Whereas the new man is the spiritual man, remade by God, by grace. Okay, so the old man is kind of the old man of sin here, I think, in part for Starbuck. Beware of Ahab. Let Ahab beware of Ahab. He waxes brave, says Ahab, but nevertheless obeys. Most careful bravery that, murmured Ahab as Starbuck disappeared. What's that he said? Ahab, beware of Ahab? There's something there. Okay, notice that. Ahab is capable of hearing someone else. Starbuck actually breaks through the wall. Okay, that was not meant to be an allusion to Ahab's wall. Maybe it was. I have never thought about it. But Starbuck breaks into Ahab's own isolated, egoistic consciousness, and Ahab encounters an other, right, outside of himself, maybe for the first time, in this book at least. So he's heard that. There's something to that. And he's blown Starbuck off, but notice he does bring the barrels up. He actually does what Starbuck asked. That could be just playing along with Starbuck because you need to keep him happy, like we've seen in that earlier Machiavellian chapter, or he could be taking Starbuck a little more seriously. Let's look at the next big Starbuck chapter. This is going to be the musket, chapter 123, page 557. I'm getting there. Okay. So, they've gone through a typhoon. And okay. Ahab, in this chapter, Ahab is asleep, or he's in his bed at least. And Starbuck, as we know, comes up outside of his door. He has a message to give him, but he starts thinking about other things first because Ahab is getting more tyrannical. Look at page 558, third paragraph. End of that middle paragraph, which is the third. So he's looking at the loaded muskets outside Ahab's room. Interesting, because Ahab was pointing a musket at Starbuck earlier. Now Starbuck is going to be thinking the reverse thought. Starbuck was an honest, upright man, but out of Starbuck's heart, at that instant, when he saw the muskets, there strangely evolved an evil thought, but so blent with its neutral and good accompaniments that for the instant he hardly knew it for itself. He would have shot me once. Yes, there's the very musket that he pointed at me. That one with the studded stock. Let me touch it, lift it. Strange. Okay. And let's see. And he says, I come to report a fair wind to him. But how fair? Fair for death and doom. That's fair for Moby-Dick. And it's a fair wind that's only fair for that accursed fish. So I'm telling him about a fair wind, but where is he steering us with this wind? Only towards Moby-Dick. This is the wrong thing, as Starbuck thinks. He would have killed me, second to last line, with the very thing I handle now. Aye, and he would fain kill all his crew by steering us toward Moby-Dick. Does he not say he will not strike his spars to any gale? Has he not dashed his heavenly quadrant? That's that steering mechanism that he broke in the previous chapter, I think. Skip a couple lines. 5 lines down, 559. Shall this crazed old man be tamely suffered to drag a whole ship's company down to doom with him? Yes, it would make him the wilful murderer of 30 men and more, if this ship comes to any deadly harm. And come to deadly harm, my soul swears that this ship will, if Ahab have his way. Let's just say that that's one of Starbuck's rational superstitions. That's a prophetic intimation that he has. And he says, if then he were this instant put aside, that crime would not be his. Ha! Is he muttering in his sleep? Yes, just there. In there, he's sleeping. Sleeping? Aye, but still alive, and soon awake again. I can't withstand thee then, old man. Not reasoning, not remonstrance, not entreaty wilt thou hearken to. All this thou scornest. Flat obedience to thy own flat commands. This is all thou breathest. Aye, and sayest the men have vowed thy vow. Sayest all of us are Ahab's. Great God forbid. So Starbuck is thinking, if I kill him now, I keep all of this from happening. This is, this is an injustice to everyone, not just to me. Not just a violation of my desires, but a violation of everyone's lives. So this is a kind of regicide argument, an argument in favor of killing of a king. This is the kind of argument that Milton and others made in the 17th century and successfully carried out. Starbuck is thinking about it. The narrator says that it's an evil thought on the previous page, but Starbuck actually, there's some relatively good reasons here. And no one would, let's see, and he's standing there back and forth. Look at the bottom of 559. On this level, Ahab's hammock swings within, his head this way. A touch, and Starbuck may survive to hug his wife and child again. Oh, Mary, Mary, boy, boy, boy. But if I wake thee not to death, old man, who can tell to what unsounded deeps Starbuck's body this day week may sink with all the crew. Great God, where art thou? Shall I? Shall I? And so now Starbuck's in the dark valley of the doubloon chapter. Can't see what to do. He ends up not killing him. Maybe that was the right thing to do. Maybe this was all an evil thought. And yet, his intimations are right. He is going to die if Ahab gets his way. And he's now deciding to let Ahab get his way. So, this is a hard place. And Starbuck, who is maybe the main kind of voice of conscience in this book, is sharing his dilemma with us. We'll see what happens between him and Ahab as this goes forward. Starbuck seemed wrestling with an angel, second to last paragraph, for the blessing. Okay, guys, I want to talk finally about Pip. So let's look for the Castaway chapter. That is chapter 93. That's page 450. Okay, we're going to look at 3 successive chapters that talk about Pip. As I said, this is a very important character at the end of this book. Chapter 93 tells us his story from 450 to 454. As we know, he's in Stubbs' boat. He is kind of scared and jumps out of the boat at a certain point. And if you do that again, I'll leave you. Well, he jumps out again and gets left for a long time, and loses his mind alone at sea. Okay, so I want to, there's some racism in there. This is all kind of framed within that kind of very mid-19th century American North-South slavery context. Not that Stubb is a slaveholder or something, but there's still some basic African racism there. but what I want to especially look at is what happens to Pip mentally through this experience. Stubb is not as important as Pip. So, bottom paragraph 453. But so it happened that those boats, without seeing Pip, suddenly spying whales close to them on one side, turned and gave chase, and Stubbs' boat was now so far away, and he and all his crew so intent upon his fish, that Pip's ringed horizon began to expand around him miserably. Can't see anything on the horizon anymore, just the line. Right? And so he's alone in the ocean. It's a terrifying thought. By the merest chance, the ship itself at last rescued him, comes back by. But from that hour, the little Negro went about the deck an idiot. Such, at least, they said he was. The sea had jeeringly kept his finite body up, but drowned the infinite of his soul. So his finite body saved, the infinite soul is drowned, not drowned entirely though, rather carried down alive to wondrous depths, where strange shapes of the unwarped primal world glided to and fro before his passive eyes, and the miser merman, wisdom, revealed his hoarded heaps, and among the joyous, heartless, ever-juvenile eternities, Pip saw the multitudinous, God-omnipresent coral insects, that out of the firmament of waters heaved the colossal orbs. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom, and spoke it, and therefore his shipmates called him mad. So man's insanity is heaven's sense, and wandering from all mortal reason, man comes at last to that celestial thought, which, to reason, is absurd and frantic, and weal or woe feels then uncompromised, indifferent as his God. Okay, what on earth is happening here? We've got another Shakespearean fool, another holy fool in Pip now. So we can put this beside the fool in Lear, and even Lear himself, who becomes a fool, as we know. What happens in Melville's language, or Ishmael's language? The infinite of his soul is drowned, but not entirely drowned. What exactly is drowned? His mental pursuit of of a kind of grasp of everything. It's your soul desires the infinite, desires God. You seek after it with your mind and your the pursuit of your life. That whole kind of impetus for control and grasping is taken from him, and his understanding, along with his understanding. But he still has a little bit of the infinite in him, which comes in the form of these mysteries which he can perceive sort of intuitively. What does he see? He sees wisdom, which is capital W. Wisdom is there at the beginning of all things. It's the divine imprint, the divine word through which all things are made, according to the wisdom literature. Right, this becomes the logos in the book of John. So he could see this kind of divine wisdom at the heart of creation, and he could see the ever juvenile eternities. He can see this. He has this eternal vision he can see the infinite through the finite, in a sort of basic, innocent way. He saw God's foot upon the treadle of the loom of creation. Okay, so Pip here, we put Pip, Ishmael, and Starbuck together at the end of this book. They're kind of the keys to reality over and against Ahab. What does Pip see of those three especially? He sees the divine in the temporal. He sees God, the creator, in the creatures, the infinite in the finite. Because his mind that kind of gets in the way has been effaced, and he has this sort of childish, innocent wisdom. Okay. And this person who sees like this now walks into this ship. He's a fool, but Ahab is going to see things in him that he doesn't see in anyone else. Let's move forward to, I think it's the log and the line. Yeah, page 567. I'm almost done. Okay, so we've got the Manxman here, and he's kind of, he's sort of irritated by Pip. Peace, thou crazy loon. Look about 10 lines down, 567. Cried the Manxman, seizing him by the arm. Away from the quarterdeck. The greater idiot ever scolds the lesser, muttered Ahab, advancing. Hands off from that holiness. Where sayest thou Pip was, boy? Astern there, sir, astern, low. Pip is like, I'm out there somewhere, I'm not in here. Nobody's home, says Pip. But Ahab, hands off that holiness. The greater idiot ever scolds the lesser. For Ahab, this Manxman from the Isle of Man, is more foolish than Pip is. Interesting thing for him to say. The wisdom of the world doesn't understand the wisdom of God. But it's funny that Ahab should say such a thing. What is happening? He says, and who art thou, boy? I see not my reflection in the vacant pupils of thy eyes. O God, that man should be a thing for immortal souls to sieve through. Who art thou, boy? Can't pin down who Pip is, but more importantly, can't see himself in the vacant pupils of thy eyes. Well, on the one hand, that's because there's not the light of intelligence there in the way that there is with others. But also, he's trying to see himself in Pip and can't. Ahab. Pip. Pip is not a little ego mirror for Ahab. It doesn't work because of who he is and who he's become. So that's really part of why Pip will play an outsized role in Ahab's life at the end of this book, and be able to kind of break in with his otherness and his vision, is because Ahab can't just wrap him up and dominate him and instrumentalize him to his task. Pip lets in light to Ahab's darkness in a way that Ahab can't forbid. And he says, skip a paragraph, there can be no hearts above the snow line. O ye frozen heavens, look down here. Ye did beget this luckless child and have abandoned him, ye creative libertines. Here, boy, Ahab's cabin shall be Pip's home henceforth, while Ahab lives. Thou touchest my inmost center, boy. Thou art tied to me by cords woven of my heartstrings. Come, let's down. He's going to keep Pip close to him. He wants to protect him. This is something precious here in this boy who sees things that I can't deny, and I can't just, in this boy who I can't just dominate. This other, he lets him in. Something we would never have expected of Ahab, as I said. Okay, so we got a chink in the armor, an opening in the wall. I don't know if I mean that in the in the big wall sense, but there's an opening in Ahab's heart here, which is going to be important. Now let's look at the last Pip chapter, and we'll be done for the day. Last Pip chapter, I think it's 130, 129, yeah. 129, so this is page 580. Ahab moving to go on deck, Pip catches him by the hand to follow. Lad, I tell thee, thou must not follow Ahab now. So they're down in his cabin. The hour is coming when Ahab would not scare thee from him, yet would not have thee by him. So the hour is coming for Moby-Dick. He can feel it, Ahab. He wants him near, but also doesn't. There's a kind of conflict of desires here. There is that in thee, poor lad, which I feel too curing to my malady. Okay, like cures like, and for this hunt my malady becomes my most desired health. Do thou abide below here, where they shall serve thee as if thou wert the captain. Aye, lad, thou shalt sit here in my screwed chair, screwed down to the floor. Another screw to it thou shalt be. Okay, there is something in thee that is too curing to my malady. Last thought for the day. Pip could cure him. He has the capacity for being cured. Part of him wants to be cured. I want you with me. But then there's also another part of him that doesn't want to be cured. This is, there's an actual drama of conscience and of the heart here, of rival desires, rival goods in Ahab, just like there was in Satan at the beginning of book 4, Paradise Lost. Although, and Ahab has even more, humanly speaking, he seems to have even more of a chance of beating this, and yet, at least here, he's pushing it away consciously. No, I don't want to be healed, right? It's a very human and real phenomenon to see the means to change, to desire them, to desire to change, and yet it's too uncomfortable. It's too much. I'm too attached to the way that I've been going. So I think this whole drama with Pip here at the end actually humanizes Ahab and makes him more sympathetic. And so we'll pick it up there on Monday. Look forward to it. Bye.